Every Sunday morning on my Instagram page, on my Twitter page, I'll put out my top 10 teams based on what happened the previous Saturday. On Wednesdays on this show, we kind of walk through that because Tuesday's our prediction day, and we don't want to go like 2 hours long on our live show, unless y'all want us to. So let me know if you want to go 2 hours on a Tuesday. But I want to walk through our top 10 teams in the country as it stands right now. Again, this is called the Nothing But Ball poll for a reason. It is not the AP poll. It is not the coaches poll. It is not the BCS. It is not the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings. This is how we see things. Now, I would say this too. We take into account the College Football Playoff when we put together these rankings. So we're just like y'all. We sit down. We watch sun up to sundown. We start with our pregame show, whether it's Big Noon or College Game Day, or maybe we're at a game. Maybe we're getting on the field and kind of getting a feel for warmups and all that. But like bottom line, college football from the start of the day well into the Sunday morning, depending on what's going on with Pac-12 After Dark. That's how we go ahead and kind of get a gauge for these rankings. So if they match up with the AP, good for the AP. If they don't, sorry, AP. That's kind of how we roll. All right, so let's start here at number 10, a team that we saw this past weekend in Columbus, Ohio. And that was Penn State. So Penn State, yes, they lost to a good Ohio State team in Columbus. I would be slow to sell my stock on Penn State for a couple of reasons. The first is I like the way they're built still. If you're a Penn State fan, you come out of that game, and a lot of people have said this already, but I'll say it again. I don't think that they had their best approach offensively. Now, far be it for me to tell that Penn State offensive staff how they should have gone about that game, but it felt like maybe their best players could have had more of an impact on that game with Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. So there's that. I think Drew Aller as well will be better because of his experience in that game. You're saying, JD, he was like 18 for 40-something. He's going to be better because of that game? Yes, he will, because that was a tough road environment. He got his first taste of an elite opponent. And I think depending on how he responds from that, there's a chance for him to improve and grow and meet the expectation, meet the moment next time it comes around. So the bad news is you lost, right? The bad news is you no longer control your own destiny when it comes to the Big Ten title race. The good news is you're not out of it. You need some help? Sure. But the good news is if you take care of business and you finish the year with one loss, and your one loss is to a top 10 Ohio State Buckeyes and maybe Big Ten champion Ohio State Buckeyes, that's a pretty solid resume. Pretty solid resume, and I think you feel okay about still finding your way into the college football playoff. Maybe not amazing, maybe not perfect, but I'm just saying I think you're set up to be right there in the hunt. So again, by the way they're built, by what they've done to this point, by the way they played Ohio State even, I thought they played them really tough for the most part, for the majority of like 3.5 quarters, 3 quarters. Penn State, for me, number 10 team in the country. At number 9, this team, man, this is a team that I've said it many times. I'll say it one more time. Ole Miss owes the rest of the college football landscape an apology because they had Alabama on the ropes. Alabama coming off the Texas loss, and they just kind of sleepwalk through USF, and everyone's like, told you Bama's down. Told you Nick Saban lost his fastball. Told you no quarterback play. We told y'all. And Alabama heard that, and they just continue to get better each and every week. But I go back to Ole Miss because Ole Miss had them after USF, and that was their chance to take down Bama and for Bama to be a 2-loss football team. They're out of the college football playoff based on what history says, and Bama just continues to stick around on the island that is the college football playoff reality show. Continue to stay in week and week out. This past week was no exception. They beat Tennessee in comeback fashion in the second half of that football game. Got a bye this week. Huge game against LSU this upcoming week in week 10. So not this week, but next week. Jalen Milroe, the way that he has evolved so far for Alabama to this point in the year, I don't think we have the same Jalen Milroe or the same Alabama team that we saw week 2 play against Texas continue to trend upward. Jalen Milroe, maybe he's not what you want as an Alabama fan. Maybe he's not Bryce Young. Maybe he's not throwing the football all over the yard for 400 yards a game and just keeping you alive in games. Like, maybe he's not that guy, but I think he's a lot closer to what you need than what he was at the beginning of the season. Makes plays with his legs when he has to. He's shown he's able to push the ball downfield and does a really good job doing it. You have some receivers kind of coming into their own. I like Alabama. They would make me nervous if I'm anybody else in the SEC. You're hoping and praying LSU takes them down next week. If you're anyone else in the SEC when it comes to their college football playoff aspirations. But all that's to say, Alabama for us, number 9 this week in the Nothing But Ball poll. At number 8, the Oregon Ducks. And one of the things that I love so much about Oregon is how battle-tested they are. Like the way they responded after that Washington loss and beat Washington State the next week. Because everyone else across the country, right? A lot of people had big games the weeks before or maybe 2 weeks before and kind of had a letdown spot. Texas, Oklahoma, Washington even, with their way they played against Arizona State. Oregon took care of business. I think the psyche of that football team is really solid. You know how I feel about them on the line of scrimmage. They're number 1 in the country in terms of yards per carry, averaging right around 6 yards a carry. That's ridiculous. Really good test for them this week against Utah, who has been the class of the Pac-12 the last couple of seasons. I think for Oregon, they're on boom watch. They're on boom watch because they got their one loss out of the way. I think they have a little more sense of urgency right now. Obviously, you wish you hadn't had one loss, but I'm just saying with Dan Lanning running that show and with how experienced Bo Nix is, I think they're poised to do some really, really good things in November. It'll be a difficult stretch. This is probably the biggest, opponent, or rather the most difficult opponent, the most difficult spot they have this week at Utah. But Oregon just continuing to stay in the race, continuing to stay in the fight, and the way they're built, I think, is going to show itself in November. Because November, it's a line of scrimmage month, right? Like everyone's dinged up, everyone's hurt, everyone's tired. Maybe your skill players are 100% healthy by the nature of it being week 10, week 11. We're in week 9 right now. Like you would imagine, everyone's kind of starting to get some more tread on the tires. I think Oregon's in good shape there. I think they're going to be able to run the football. I think they're going to be able to, again, rely back on that experience the rest of the way here. Oregon for us, number 8 this week in the Nothing But Ball poll. Speaking of being dinged up, we'll talk about this team a little bit later in this live show, but the Texas Longhorns at number 7 this week. And I want to make sure we say this. They escaped Houston. I do not believe they were exposed at Houston. Quinn Ewers goes down. Texas was at a point where they could run away with that football game, up 21-0. They're banged up in the secondary. Letdown spot after the bye week, after Red River. It is what it is. I'm not overly concerned about it. Now, we're going to talk about this. Again, I said this already. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the live show in a minute. But they have had every possible culture test imaginable to this point. The Alabama game. How do you handle success after that? That's a big win. Okay, you handle it okay. Oklahoma. You lose that game. Close game, gritty back and forth kind of game, rivalry game. Have a bye week, you'll play Houston. How do you handle that loss? They handled it in the sense of if it were pass-fail, they passed. Maybe they don't get an A+, but you still, hey, C's get degrees, baby. And so Texas got out of Houston with a C kind of effort in some sense. The big key for them this weekend against BYU, whoever's playing quarterback, I'm going to go ahead and assume it's Malik Murphy based on the way that this thing has trended and based on the fact that he was the guy that came into the game against Houston. Big key for them will be to make him comfortable, whether it's running the football, holding it down on defense. Very important that he is able to play within himself and not have to press and be the guy to win the game for you. So we'll talk more about Texas in a second, but for us, they're number 7 in the Nothing But Ball poll. At number 6, I want to kind of say the same thing. We got Washington. Nothing fraudulent about them. Not fraudulent, just a letdown spot after a big win over Oregon. You go on, or not on the road, rather. You play at home again for the second week in a row. Arizona State comes to town. A sneaky Arizona State team, might I add. I think they're headed the right direction under Kenny Dillingham. I was encouraged they won a rock fight because I've sat here a couple of weeks in a row and been like, well, I don't know about Washington, man. Like they kind of got one trick up their sleeve, and that is score a whole lot of points. And if they don't score a whole lot of points, where are they at? They won this game with a defensive touchdown. So I was encouraged to see that from Washington. The gauntlet for them starts in November. They're at USC, Utah, at Oregon State, Washington State. The stylistic matchups we're going to get from Washington going forward here will tell us a lot and just be a lot of fun to watch. Against USC could kind of be that track meet feel. USC's defense has got their own issues, but if Caleb Williams can kind of rally the troops, circle the wagons a little bit, could have a lot of points scored. Then you go to the Utah kind of game. That'll be smash mouth, try and play in a phone booth. Can Washington score enough points to be able to get ahead of that kind of situation, just kind of set the pace in that game? We'll break down those games when they get here, but the bottom line, Washington's season will be determined by what happens in those games. Keep an eye on this now. Even if Washington drops one of those games, could still very well find themselves in the Pac-12 title game and play Oregon for a rematch of the Pac-12 title. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if Oregon gets there. But for us, Washington, number 6 in the nothing but ball poll. We kind of got a theme here, 7 through 5. At 5, we got Oklahoma. They beat UCF, not exposed, found a way to get it done. I think UCF, to be honest with y'all, was the most difficult matchup for Oklahoma to draw, or rather, this was the worst spot for Oklahoma with them playing UCF, because UCF now, the way they run their offense, they do so much with misdirection and with tempo and with messing with the second and third level of the defense. And we talk about Oklahoma a lot. They're aggressive defensively. They want to get after you. And UCF threw the kitchen sink at Oklahoma, did a great job being able to set the pace with what they did offensively. And credit Oklahoma, found a way to get it done. Found a way to get it done. This is still a team that I think is figuring out how to have things expected of them, if that makes sense. I'm not talking about the fan base. There's always expectations in Norman, Oklahoma, so we understand that. But I'm saying it went from Oklahoma being the 6 and 7 football team. Can Brent Venables be the guy? What's up with Oklahoma? Are they going to be any good when they go to the SEC? Should we pound the alarm? Like, all that nonsense was said in the offseason. And now Oklahoma is like, well, hey, they control their own destiny. They could be a college football playoff team. They're going to be the better roster the rest of the way. They're at Kansas this week. The latest that I've seen is Jalen Daniels, the quarterback for Kansas, who's a problem if he's able to play in this game, considered like questionable / doubtful. So we'll see what happens there. If he does play, that could change the complexion of things. But how they handle the win over UCF going forward is going to tell us a lot. My hope would be, and the expectation for me, honestly, is that Oklahoma now, being able to escape a spot like that against UCF kind of creates some new sense of urgency, this understanding that, hey, we can't just show up and play against a lesser brand, lesser logo, and just walk out with a dub. Like, it takes a little bit more than that. So I think Brent Venables will get them ready to go, and I'm excited to see how they respond again from that kind of a game. At number 4, we got Florida State. The good news, still undefeated, and they have an incredible response mechanism. Talk about that a lot with Florida State. One of the best teams responding in the country, in my humble opinion. Now, the bad news is they've had to exercise that response muscle quite a bit to this point in the year. You talk about the Boston College game, the Clemson game, the game against Duke this past week was no exception. So I love that you're able to get off the ropes. My concern is, hey, why are we on the ropes so much? So we'll see what happens in Florida State going forward. They'll still play Miami. They'll still play Florida. Those will be good tests for them, rivalry kind of games. You kind of throw logic out the window. My thing for them, the determining factor for them for success when it comes to the rest of the season and the college football playoff will be, what does the run game look like in November? We said it for Oregon a little bit ago, the line of scrimmage and how that's going to show itself for them this latter part of the season. That has to be a thing for Florida State, because you've already seen it. They've had some skill players dinged up, and you're going to get in these games where who knows what weather looks like, if it's a little bit slippery. And I mean, I'm not a meteorologist by any stretch of the imagination, but what I want to make sure we say is Florida State has to be multiple offensively. We know they can throw the football. We know Keon Coleman was developed in a lab. We understand that. Johnny Wilson the same way. Like Jaheim Bell, freak show over the middle. We're all on the same page there. No one's questioning their ability to throw the football. But you got to have balance to be able to win some of these games in November when teams do take away that pass game, or at least do a better job of managing the pass game. So Lawrence Toafili is someone I'm watching going forward. We'll see how they look running the football. They looked great against Syracuse, have left something to be desired against Duke, which Duke is a good defense, but I'm just saying that has to be there for Florida State if they want to be a team that ends up in that Final Four and wins the ACC as a whole. At number 3, got Ohio State. Ohio State, another team we have a segment on a little bit later in the show. I think it's Ohio State 2.0 right now. I really do. I mean, I think what we've seen from them to this point in the year doesn't match up with the snapshot of what we expected Ohio State to be based on the last couple of seasons, because it's not Justin Fields throwing the ball around the yard. It's not C.J. Stroud in this offense scoring 40 a game, but it's tough. It's scrappy. They have the best resume in the country right now with a win at Notre Dame and a win over Penn State in Columbus. We'll talk more about this in a second, but I think Ohio State is playing SEC style of football. And what I mean by that is the way that they are attacking the line of scrimmage, the way that they're moving the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively, and the way they're kind of just having the offense squeeze you once the defense takes care of business. Like, it feels very much so game control-ish. I'm excited to see what they do here against Michigan when it comes to that game, because I think Ohio State now is a different operation than what they've been in the past. And we'll talk more about that here in just a second. But Yeah, Ohio State, for me, number 3 in the country. Now, we could swap 1 and 2 if you've watched our show or if you have watched what we do on Sunday when it comes to the Sunday sprint. We kind of give you where things stand when it comes to college football playoff rankings. We talk about that on Sunday morning, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. We have Michigan at 2. If you have them at 1, hey, it is what it is. No problems there. No qualms. I think Michigan has been the most dominant team in the country, to be real with y'all. They throttled Michigan State. I see a new gear offensively for them, and a lot of that is attributed to J.J. McCarthy. A lot of that, I think, is also attributed to the weapons, because everybody said this preseason, hey, if you want to get over that hump, you want to win a national title, the offense, we need to be a little bit more multiple. J.J. McCarthy, this was the headline everyone was saying. Can we get the next step from J.J. McCarthy? And I think we've seen that, but I don't think we should dismiss either the weapons and how they've taken the next step. Roman Wilson is a walking receiving touchdown every single week, it feels like. Colston Loveland, I said it before, one of the most underrated tight ends in the country. I think he's a chess piece for that offense. You know what the running back room already was, but what they have when it comes to throwing the ball downfield right now, yes, it's J.J. McCarthy, but I think also those weapons and how they've stepped up in a big way and taken their game to a new level has put unique pressure on defenses to honor Michigan in different ways. And if you don't honor them in those ways, then those weapons will hurt you. I don't know that we saw that quite as much last year. We're seeing it right now. Michigan, for me, number 2 in the country going into week 9. Now at number 1, I got Georgia. And a lot of people say, well, JD, if this is the nothing but ball poll and you're making Georgia number 1, you must not be watching ball. All right. Hey, I hear you. If we're the last to get off the Georgia at number 1 branch, we're okay with that. The reason why I have Georgia at number 1, first of all, they had a bye last week, and I'm not going to drop them after not playing a game. That's the first part of this. Second part of this is we've seen a lot change within Georgia the last couple of years. We haven't seen the result change at Georgia. And what I mean by that is we've seen coordinators change. We've seen quarterbacks change. We've seen personnel change. Doesn't matter. Georgia just continues to play to their standard. They develop like nobody else and put the best product on the field, and when it's time to win, they play their best football. And I think we're going to see that from Georgia in November. Now, Brock Bowers is out, and that's obviously a detriment to them roster-wise, but I'm curious, and I've said this before, there's no way to spin Brock Bowers' injury as a positive. You're not better with him not on the field. Like, that's a reality. What I would say, though, is I think Kirby Smart now has the undivided attention of his football team if he didn't already before, and there's a chance now to create some more sense of urgency, to say, hey, number 19 is not in the game. It's going to take more from you, going to take more from you, going to take more from you. Can you rise to the occasion? I think Kirby Smart challenging his football team and making the mission clear. There's nobody better in the country at getting their guys ready to play than Kirby Smart with motivation at that point in time. And I think that he has that now. So for me, Georgia is number 1 in the country when it comes to the nothing but ball poll. To recap it for you, Penn State at 10, Alabama at 9. We have Oregon at 8, Texas at 7, Washington at 6, Oklahoma at 5, Florida State at 4, Ohio State at 3, Michigan at 2, and Georgia at 1 heading into week 9, just after week 8. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.